Does the political divide today seem wider than ever? If you are right-leaning, do you find it baffling that left-wing protesters think it is beneficial to disrupt Christmas celebrations to protest Israel or destroy great works of art in the name of climate change? How can these people not see that these actions are counterproductive? On the other hand, if you are left-leaning, do you find it bizarre that conservatives once opposed gay marriage and now get upset at things like Drag Queen Story Hour? What's wrong with these people? What's the big deal? The truth is that the root of these political divides are not ideological, they are evolutionary. Accepting this reality is the key to understanding why people behave as they do, up to and including the greatest mass delusion of all time, namely the COVID panic. In this video, I hope to lay the foundations for you by referencing the works of Jonathan Haidt, as well as Thomas Sowell. In future videos, I plan on exploring each of Haidt's 6 moral values in more detail and relate them in ways that can help you in the real world. To begin, we need to understand the role of evolution, how it created our brain, and why we're like elephants. Let's begin. From insects crawling on the ground to the fish in the sea to ourselves in glittering cities, the goal of all life on Earth is to procreate. The only difference between man with his big brain and the rest of God's creatures is that only man can delude himself into thinking, this is not so. Strip away all of the manifestations that our science and logic create, and very little differentiates ourselves from our ape cousins. We are hairless apes with big brains, nothing more, and just as rational. From the time our ancestors first crawled out of the ocean 400 million years ago, our brains have been trying to perform actions that keep us alive long enough to procreate. Just like the rest of the animals in nature, we do this by instinct. This only began to change about 3 million years ago when we began to develop a form of thinking that allowed us to create tools. This was a tremendous evolutionary advantage, but it did not supersede our previous 400 million years of programming. Consider this fact. Every second your brain processes 11 million bits of information, whereas your rational brain only processes 40 bits of that. In The Righteous Mind, Jonathan Haidt compares this evolutionary setup of the human mind to that of a gigantic instinctive elephant ridden by a tiny rational rider. The rider likes to think it is in charge, but that is a delusion. It is the rider's job to serve the elephant, and it is the mighty elephant that is really making the decisions. The addition of the rational rider to our mental makeup was a tremendous evolutionary advantage. Aside from the fact that it allowed us to conceptualize ideas like tools, it also allowed us to work in groups. There is a tremendous evolutionary advantage to working with others, which is why elephants in herds are much more likely to reproduce. However, once you begin living in herds, you need to learn what behaviors to encourage and discourage for the herd to thrive. Jonathan Haidt has identified 6 behaviors or values that can be used to optimize your interactions with your fellow elephants and ensure the herd's success. They are the values of care versus harm, liberty versus oppression, fairness versus cheating, loyalty versus betrayal, authority versus subversion, and sanctity versus degradation. Conservatives find value in all 6 of these variables, whereas liberals only value 3. Why do these differences arise, and what are the evolutionary advantages to each approach? The evolutionary differences arise from the different approaches that conservative and liberal elephants take with regard to their own herds versus how open they are to others. Conservative elephants are much more concerned with the success of their own herd. The evolutionary advantages of this approach is fairly obvious in that if your herd is successful, you will multiply and prosper. Maintaining the strongest possible herd requires the use of all 6 of Haidt's moral values. This manifests itself in what Thomas Sowell refers to as the constrained view of life, which he puts this way.
The constrained vision, I'm quoting from A Conflict of Visions, sees the evils of the world as deriving from the limited and unhappy choices available, given the inherent moral and intellectual limitations of human beings, close quote. So the constrained vision understands itself as constrained by the limitations of reality itself.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
In other words, they cannot proceed as so many do, that good things happen automatically, but bad things are somebody's fault.
Got it. Got it. And then to continue here, the constrained vision, again, quoting from A Conflict of Visions, for the amelioration improvement of the human condition, the constrained vision relies on certain social processes, such as moral traditions, the marketplace, or families.
Conservative elephants see themselves as inherently flawed and limited, and they rely on institutions, processes, and traditions to ameliorate this reality. They greatly value the social order within their herds, seeing it as difficult to achieve and maintain. Although they are open to new ideas, they do not value novelty for its own sake. Conservative elephants believe that change should be done slowly and with due consideration in order to not upset the existing workable order. They recognize how complex the world is and that there are rarely single solutions to problems. There are trade-offs. Liberal elephants, on the other hand, are much more open to elephants belonging to other herds. The evolutionary advantage here is that by accepting new elephants into your herd, you increase its genetic diversity. However, the trade-off for this advantage is that to be so open to new elephants from other herds, you must be less concerned with your own. This is why liberal elephants take the existing social order and its benefits for granted, and why they do not appreciate the 3 values that ensure herd cohesion. Valuing 3 of the 6 moral values leads to liberal elephants possessing the unconstrained vision of Thomas Sowell.
All right, which brings us to the unconstrained vision. When, again, I'm quoting you, when Rousseau said that man is born free but everywhere in chains, he expressed the essence of the unconstrained vision, in which the fundamental problem is not nature or man, but institutions.
Yes.
Would you explain that one?
Well, he has the notion that, that good things happen naturally. And if they're bad things, it's because institutions, including civilization itself, have made these bad things happen. And of course,
Liberal elephants view themselves as inherently good. Any failings that can be seen in individuals can be attributed to systems that they believe elites, meaning themselves, can change. They see problems in terms of single variable solutions rather than trade-offs. As a result, their solutions are often bedeviled by unintended consequences. The slow-moving disaster of the COVID panic was a perfect example of how conservative and liberal elephants deal with problems. During the initial wave of fear, both elephants focused on the single variable of COVID cases and employed strategies to try and minimize them. As time went on, though, conservative elephants became increasingly concerned whether such policies as forced masking, lockdowns, and vaccine mandates were more harmful than beneficial. Liberal elephants, due to their limited moral matrix, simply could not see the unintended consequences of their myopic focus and turned to censorship and shame in an attempt to drown out opposing views. Throughout the COVID panic, you saw liberal elephants emphasizing one-size-fits-all top-down solutions, such as closing beaches and banning public events. This is why they could not accept that COVID was really only dangerous to the very old and frail, and that individuals could themselves take action to improve their health by exercising, eating healthy, and getting fresh air. Liberal elephants almost always dismiss the actions of individuals in the outcomes they get. They can only think in terms of systems. Man is not rational, but he is stellar at rationalizing.
I should be doing my homework now. But the way I look at it, playing in the snow is a lot more important. Out here, I'm learning real skills that I can apply throughout the rest of my life.
Such as?
Procrastinating and rationalizing.
In future videos, I plan on expanding on these ideas by going in-depth into each of Haidt's 6 moral matrix values. In particular, how they relate to our elephant's herd behavior and how this manifests itself into various policies, particularly with respect to the disastrous COVID response. Make sure you like and subscribe so that you don't miss those. Knowing people's basic programming will not only help you better understand the events in our world, but will help you deal with others in your own life. If you're interested in the origins of the COVID panic and never want to experience those dark times again, get my free ebook, The Little Book of COVID Red Pills. In it, I outline the psychological origins for the panic, as well as give you simple arguments you can use to red pill anyone on the evils of the COVID regime and the failed COVID response. If we're to avoid those dark times in the future, we must understand how and why it happened so we never experience them again. Get it today at redpillcovid.com and learn the truth.